Good evening and welcome to another edition of Prompt Response. I am your host, Ryan Ozzie Smith, voted #1 creamiest voice on Twitch 3 years running. I am a voice actor, a Twitch streamer, and you can find me on Twitch by searching Aussie Man Plays. I am also your host for tonight's reading, Popcorn, the 4th chapter of the Bram Stoker Award finalist book Bittersweets by Angela Yuriko Smith. This story does have some elements of self-harm and graphic violence, so if these are things you would rather not listen to, now is your time to click out. Prompt Response is sponsored by Authortunities, a weekly calendar of author opportunities for busy writers who need to know who, how much, and when is the deadline on Substack. You can subscribe at authortunities.substack.com or follow in the links in the description. In the last chapter, we experienced a regular driver's ed class where students were given the correct perspective by actually hitting a body. All should have been business as usual, but having an empath and an apath in the same class provided to be a challenge. And now, let's revisit the bittersweets. I believe today we will be returning to see what our nameless hero from chapter 1 is up to. If you would like to read along, the book is available to read on Kindle Unlimited. Links in the description. Bittersweets Chapter 5. Popcorn. I walked into the lobby of the Bittersweets and saw her. Azrael looked the same as the first time I saw her. Her hair, almost black at the roots, lightened into a honey blonde at the tips. The effect wasn't unnatural, like she needed a root touch-up. The effect was more like a twilight sky glowing towards morning. She looked up at me and frowned. "I don't have you in my books," she said. I wandered over to her behind the desk. Even though we'd spoken on a near monthly basis for the past 3 years, we'd never moved beyond the mild familiarity. Not because I wouldn't want that, it just never happened. My friend booked me in," I answered. "He might have mistakenly put it under his name." "You're dying too much," she said. "It's against our policy. I won't book you more than once a month. Death isn't meant to be this frequent." I smiled and leaned on the counter towards her. I was trying to see the names in her book because I'd forgotten who I'd conned into booking for me. She lifted her book so I couldn't read it. "It has been over a month for me," I told her. "Look it up in your records." Her eyes flickered back and forth on the page and then up to the digital wall calendar. "A month to the day." She looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Okay, so this seems a little sneaky," I said. "I know I can't book another death for a 1-month period. But I also know it's so the medi-nanos don't start repairing themselves and mess you up. I waited a month. I know how busy the bittersweets gets. And having someone book for me speeds it all along. You want my money, right?" She looked at me through narrowed eyes. "You have a problem. You're becoming a junkie." I threw my hands up in the air dramatically. "Whoa! Is this how you treat your faithful clients? Call me a death junkie? I should complain to management." She wasn't impressed. "I am the management," she said. She leaned forward across the counter and took my hands in hers. Her touch felt like the muscle rub they wipe all over athletes, hot and cold at the same time. I wondered what she would be like to kiss. "The rules are made to keep you safe," she said. "You're so involved in killing yourself that you forget to live. Bittersweets is supposed to be here to enrich your life, not sap it." Her eyes seemed to light up on their own, as if they were backlit. I could see summer in them, the perfect kind of day you only ever get as a kid. I wanted to stay there, savoring that feeling. "Go home," she said. Home? That thought melted my summer day memory like a lost popsicle, sticky and wasted on the sidewalk. Home for me was a grey one-room flat down the street. The windows were all painted over, but the streetlights still seemed to sneak their way through the scratches to keep me up at night. My neighbours were all nut jobs in the middle of DNA breakdowns. Sometimes I find clots of nasty wet hair stuck in the hallways, and I want to puke. Home to me is a dead place. I'm only alive when I'm here. I jerked my hands away. Are you going to honour my booking or not? Azrael sighed and looked back at the book before looking back up at me. I suppose legally I have to. What package was booked? I swear she looked a little like she was going to cry. I felt bad, but I needed this. I needed this. It was a circus fetish package with assistant, I answered. Bring on the bizarro. My stomach did a little somersault. The circus deaths were considered kind of extreme to most recreational suiciders, but I was an aficionado by now. Since my very first experience, I was hooked on the rush a renewed life brings on. Colours are brighter, everything tastes amazing, and even my gross neighbours seem tolerable. Azrael didn't say anything else. She checked me into her logbook, retrieved the keycard, and slid it across the counter to me. I snatched it up quick before she could change her mind. I'm good to go. See you on the flip side. I grinned at her, backing my way into the elevator. I held my keycard up and used it to blow her a kiss. You know, you say that almost every time, Azrael said. It's getting a little old. And so are you. She turned her back on me. I stood still for a moment as sadness flooded me. I felt like a child that had lost something, but I couldn't remember what had been so precious. If the girl behind the counter had turned back to me then, I might have hesitated, but Azrael remained facing away, stubbornly. Whatever was wilting my wonder, I knew the fix was just a few floors below. Then I guess I'm just off to the circus then, I said to her back, and I turned my own self away. The elevator opened, and I stepped in and hit the button for the basement. That's where the real action at the Bittersweets is. I'd gone all out on this suicide. I may have a crappy life, but I'd had some nitro deaths. Life passed me by in the featureless flat miasma until the days I died. Like a beam of technicolor light cutting through an abandoned warehouse. Those were the days that flooded me with meaning and clarity. Joy, tangible, and sweat drenched everything and continued to radiate. Eventually, it always faded. In its absence, living seemed even more dull. The elevator door slid open, and I walked out into the cold concrete hall. No frills in the basement. It was all business with cement block wall and janitor's cart to one end. Not many people took on the large-scale experiences the basement could handle. I read somewhere that the ceiling is 3 stories high. I walked up to a pair of metal double doors and pushed my way in, looking up at the trapeze and nets swaying high overhead. I could believe it. I stepped in and let the big metal doors close behind me. As usual, the Bittersweets had gone all out to create an authentic experience. A long wooden pole was set in the center of the room to hold up heavy folds of canvas tent in red and white. Nets, rope, and tiny platforms swayed above me. A spotlight flooded the area, raised ring dominating the center of the room. Empty bleachers, coils of rope, and storage lockers littered the edges of the light. Curtains of a thick, striped canvas hung from the ceiling. High above it were all the massive lights hanging in midair like UFOs. A jolt of anticipation went through my nerves like lightning as adrenaline flooded my system. Kill me already. At the opposite end of the ring, the curtains moved and a woman in a scanty ringleader outfit emerged. Her red sequined coat and tails hugged every curve. Fishnet stockings, patent leather knee boots, and a little top hat pinned into her cartoon bright red hair completed the look. She saw me from across the tent. Heavy green eyeshadow framed her eyes and nodded. "Ready?" she called out. I grinned, all goofy and excited, but I didn't care what she thought of me. I was paying everything I had for this experience. I'd even redeemed my vocational vouchers. Screw moving out of my maintenance job. I'd finally realized it didn't matter what I did on a day-to-day basis. I was only alive and happy when I was dying. I sold my future for this night. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of sawdust and sand. This was the moment I savored, when time stopped for me and all the crap rest of my life seemed inconsequential. "Ready," I said finally. I kept my eyes closed, waiting. Electric silence, and then carnival music and laugh track cheers filled the basement area. The smell of fresh popcorn wafted towards me. "Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready?" My eyes flew open to see my sexy ringmaster striding into the ring with a microphone. From behind the curtain, a half-dozen clowns came out of nowhere. They cavorted into the ring with somersaults and backflips. One of them started chasing the other clowns with a chainsaw. He wore a hockey mask. Nothing at the Bittersweets was fake when it came to death, so I assumed it was real. The other clowns scattered before him, comically sprawling on their faces and doing silly flips as they pretended to trip. These guys were good enough they should have had their own show beyond the suicide circuit. I couldn't help laughing and clapping. Chainsaw Clown took notice of me and started running my way. Even though it seemed counterproductive, I couldn't help taking off when he got close. Fight or flight is impossible to turn off, I had found, even when your intention is to lose. "Holy crap!" I yelled, laughing. The guy was seriously scary. I ran up to the ring mistress and bowed low. "At your service, ma'am." "We have a volunteer from the audience," she yelled into the microphone. She grabbed my hand and lifted it over her head, champion style. Canned cheers erupted all around us. My eyes scanned the shadowed bleachers. They were still empty, but who cares? This was my fantasy. I lifted my other hand into the air and made a victorious fist pump. The crowd got louder. She dropped my hand and the crowd silenced. "My good sir," said the ring mistress, "are you ready to entertain the masses gathered here, even at risk of your own life?" Another thrill went through me, and I could feel goosebumps raise on my skin. I looked into her eyes, each grey iris framed in long neon lashes. "Yes," I said. "Sir, the people gathered here today can't hear you." She was yelling into the mic, even though we both knew there was no one here but us and the clowns. "I asked if you were ready to entertain the people of this audience, even at the risk of your own life. What do you say, good sir?" "Yes!" I screamed, throwing my head back and uttering primal affirmation to the ceiling. "Yes!" She lowered the microphone and leaned in close. She smelled of tobacco and sweat. "Then let's get started," she said, purring low into my ear. My insides quivered. She raised the microphone to her lips with a smile. "Clowns!" she yelled again into the microphone. I jumped in spite of myself. "Please escort our daring hero to the high wires." Behind me, Chainsaw Clown started revving his motor. I spun around to see him approaching, blue face paint showing through the eyes of his hockey mask. He was ridiculously scary. I ran. I get that I shouldn't be afraid of being chopped up by a chainsaw, given that I came here for an exciting death, and I'd already been done by chainsaw last year. I had accepted a future of shitty jobs in exchange for this experience, and there was no way these guys were getting an early night. I ran, screaming like a little girl around the ring. the clowns all banding together trying to trip me with their oversized shoes and throwing things as I went past. They started chanting, and even though I'd gotten a little jaded about dying, I was feeling real fear. "Chop him up! Chop him up!" The canned crowd was cheering and screaming with the clowns. The chainsaw clown had nearly caught up with me a few times, but luckily for me, his big shoes slowed him down. Not luckily for me, I was getting tired. I stumbled as I tried to hop over a beach ball and went down face first into the sawdust. I caught a whiff of acrid animal urine. Like I said, the bittersweets was top notch for authenticity. A mechanical whir filled my ears as I tried to turn. I felt my clothes and flesh twist together as a chainsaw took a nibble of my side. I screamed, garbled, and spat sawdust and drooled as I propelled myself forward. Ahead of me, a rope ladder was attached to the center pole. I'd been trying to prolong the chase, but I think the staff was getting impatient. Up the ladder I scrambled. The crowd went wild. I knew they were all pre-recorded cheers, but it still made me feel like some kind of valiant hero as I escaped certain death. My ribs throbbed where the chainsaw had bit in. Halfway up, I looked down, panting. The clowns and the ring mistress were all gathered around, watching me climb. As soon as I stopped, the clown with the chainsaw made like he was going to saw the pole in two. I cooperated and finished the climb. At the top, I sat down to rest on the small platform. The only way off was to walk a tightrope or climb back down. I didn't see how the tightrope was going to happen. I'm not that talented. I was pretty sure I hadn't ordered this. There was no way I even know how to step on that thing. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of the ring mistress boomed even louder from up here. I could see big speakers set in the corners of the ceiling. "Please turn your attention to the platform high above our heads and witness our brave volunteer walk the thread of flame." Drumbeats and trumpets blared out into the room as a symphonic storm. A woman in gold lame bikini walked into the ring. In her hand, she carried an ornate wooden bow. At her hip was a quiver of arrows. The clowns were all entertaining themselves with feints and swoons at her good looks. Chainsaw Clown knelt before her, placing his blade at her feet like a knight. I watched, confused. Into the ring came a small boy painted in gold. He held aloft a lighted torch. I didn't order this at all. "Hail, Prometheus, bringing the gift of fire," said the ringleader. The girl in the gold bikini pulled an arrow from her quiver and held it out to the boy. Suddenly, I was a fortune teller and I could predict the future. "Ah, crap," I said out loud, and I looked around wildly for some kind of escape besides the rope. If I tried that, I would just fall right to my death with no more foreplay. "Stop!" I yelled down. "This is going too fast. It's supposed to be epic. I paid for this." The archer girl placed an arrow against the bowstring and pulled it tight, aiming at me. I struggled to stand up. The boy lifted his torch, setting the end aflame. She let go, and the arrow came straight at me and embedded into the platform with a thunk. The heat was almost immediate. Yes, I was here to have a death, but pain was still pain, and no one could just stand in fire and passively burn to death. "Ah, assholes!" I yelled down as I hopped back and forth on the platform. Flame was already licking around the wood, seeking a taste of me. I'd have to try the rope. If I made it, these suckers were going to be stuck here all night, killing me. Then I was turning in a complaint. I didn't get far. I set one foot out onto the rope, and then it just fell away in a trail of ash. The wood under my other foot cracked, knocking my head into the pole, and then it too gave way. Down I went, falling in a shower of ember and ash to meet the concrete floor below. The crunch I made when I hit was pretty extreme. There was some sort of pop, which I think may have been my skull, but then all sound and sense went wonky. The ring mistress, the clowns, and the gold bikini gathered around to look at me. Good for me, I was still hanging in there. Not done, I managed to gasp. That was it, though. My lungs were punctured and there was such a riot of pain, so I couldn't tell what else might be going on. At least I was getting my money's worth from the resuscitators. This death sucked. Actually, you are done, said Gold Bikini. Azrael said this is for your own good. You've got a problem. She notched another arrow and pulled back, the arrow tip a foot away from my left eye. My brain was so scrambled by this point, I don't think I understood what she was doing until it was too late. The arrow left the bow. In a split second, it buried into what was left of my brain. I woke up, sore and sad, on the lobby couch. Azrael was sitting next to me. She looked as sad and sorry as I felt. As soon as she noticed my eyes open, she looked hardened. I hate to inform you, but you have been banned from the bittersweets, she said. My brain must have still been repairing because I couldn't understand what she was trying to say. What? I asked. I'd never seen her out from behind the counter before. Her outer thigh was against my side, and I was acutely aware of the touch. This is an intervention, she said. Her eyes softened as her brow furrowed in concern. She leaned forward and placed her hand on my cheek. The gesture was so intimate and strange, I was shocked to silence. You can't do this anymore. You have gotten addicted and you're only living to die. I have to ban you. The words started clicking and making sense. What? I'm one of your best customers, I said. I struggled to sit up. You can't ban me. No one else has the tech for this. You guys corner the market on resurrection. Two big goons appeared out of my peripheral vision like ghosts. They stood behind Azrael, communicating a warning without uttering a word. I didn't care. I pushed Azrael away from me and sat up all the way. I could still feel soft, painful spots where I was healing. My head ached. If you ban me, I have nothing left to live for. Seriously. Azrael looked pained, like this hurt her, like it did me, and I felt a pang of guilt. This was because I cheated the system and gotten a friend to make my reservation too early. I'll wait longer from now on. Please believe me. I'll have nothing left, Azrael. And that's exactly why I have to ban you, she said. You've gotten so hooked on death that you've closed everything else down. The bittersweets can't be responsible for suicide abuse. Azrael stood up, signaling the interview was over. No, I yelled and slammed my hand down on the couch. The gesture seemed pathetic, especially since the Beef Brothers scooped me up like an angry toddler and started carrying me outside. I couldn't believe I was being expelled from the bittersweets. Do you know how much money I've spent here? I'll find a way around this. You know I will. Suddenly, Azrael was in my face as they carried me out the door. There is only one way around this. The path you are choosing only leads one way. Turn back. She smiled at me then, soft and gentle. I was reminded how I had a crush on her the first time I'd seen her. She leaned forward and kissed me on the forehead. Weird, but I kind of wanted to cry just then. You'll be back, she said, but only for a minute before you're removed. And then I was outside. The goons must have called a cab because suddenly I was being folded into it. The full impact hit me minutes later. I'd given up my future prospects for this experience. It was supposed to charge me up for a lifetime. Instead, I felt no redeeming rush of joy. Everything was flat and washed in grey. My future stretched before me with no hope of anything better. A shitty flat awaited me. A shitty job was beyond that. The one bright spot the rush of a good death was now no longer in the picture. Azrael was right. This was no longer recreational. I needed it. I pressed my forehead against the glass, watching the cold rain trickle down without touching me. Just like life. I had to fix this. And that concludes our story for the day. I hope you enjoyed this reading of Bram Stoker Award finalist book, Bittersweets by Angela Yuriko Smith. I am Ryan Ozzie Smith, and it has been a pleasure to be your host tonight. If you'd like to contact me, join me on Twitch by searching Aussieman Plays or click on my link in the description.